morning, everyone. My name is Christine Rogers, and I work for the Wallkill River Watershed Management Group. I hope you've all been really enjoying the conference so far, and I know that we have another great workshop for you today. So before we get started, I just want to go over some of the logistics for our session. So we're going to save all questions until the end. If you do have a question, please type it into the chat box. And the chat box is over on the right-hand side of your screen, and you can see that it has both the event and the session tab. Make sure that you have the session tab selected, because that's where the chat for specifically this workshop will be entered. I'll be monitoring the chat. We'll answer as many questions as we can at the end. I know some people were asking questions about how big the presentation can be. You can maximize the screen by double-clicking on the presentation. It doesn't, through this hop-in platform, it doesn't get to be full screen, but we will be sharing the slides with everyone after the conference. And this session is also being recorded, and it's going to be, all of these different workshop sessions are going to be posted onto the New Jersey Highlands Coalition's YouTube page after the conference is complete. So I'm excited to introduce both of our speakers today. So Juniper is going to be the first presenter, and she works for the New Jersey Highlands Coalition, and she is the project manager for the Lopatcong Creek Initiative. And through the initiative, she advocates for behavior change among citizens, helps to facilitate a green infrastructure program for implementation, and then also coordinates a citizen science program that she's going to talk about today. And then our second speaker is Erin Stretz, who is the Assistant Director of Science and Stewardship at the Watershed Institute, where she really specializes in water quality monitoring, assessment, and protection. And beginning in 2018, Erin started coordinating the New Jersey Watershed Watch Network, and was able to provide technical assistance for water quality monitoring groups, and has worked to build volunteer monitoring capacity, and then also act as the liaison between these community monitoring groups and the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. So at this point, I'm gonna turn it over to Juniper to begin her presentation.
Excellent. It looks like my screen is already shared, so I should be ready to go. Christine did a great introduction. My name is Juniper Leifer. I do run a program called the Lopatcong Creek Initiative, which happens to be a program of the New Jersey Highlands Coalition. And I gotta say, I'm excited to talk to you about this subject today because I have been incredibly impressed by what can be accomplished by ordinary people just like me who don't have a background in science when they just get a little bit of equipment and a little bit of guidance. So I'm going to take you on a little bit of an adventure. And I could talk about Lopatcong Creek Initiative all day long, but there's no time for that. So you guys are just going to have to assume it's awesome. Go check out our Facebook page, follow all of our activities. We are a hyper-focused grassroots group. We are working through the Delaware River Watershed Initiative, so we are working with several partners, all dedicated to water quality improvement, and we're working in the Lopatcong Creek watershed specifically. So, you may wonder, why are we doing that? Well, the Lopatcong Creek is facing a lot of the same pressures and stresses that streams all across the state and the country are facing. So our deepest concerns, again, are for drinking water. The Lopatcong Creek happens to be a tributary to the Delaware, so we know that it contributes to the drinking water supply. We know that there's tremendous development pressure and only increasing stormwater contamination as a result. And goodness knows we live in a beautiful community with a lot of rural character, and we are deeply concerned about maintaining what's left of our wild trout population. And this is one of my favorite subjects because, to be honest, it crosses all political lines. Everybody seems to be interested in protecting the outdoors and the ability to recreate. So nobody calls you a hippie when you talk about the trout, which is awesome. All right, so, like I said, we have all of these concerns. We're working through the Delaware River Watershed Initiative. We're trying to raise awareness. We're trying to educate the community. We're trying to encourage behavior change. And this is targeted at everyone from the regular people, the residents who live in our community, all the way up to our municipal officials. So we want them to implement projects. We're looking for enhanced ordinances, and we're looking for people to understand that they are part of the problem, and that they can be part of the solution as well. So it became pretty clear early on that it would really be helpful to us if we could expand upon the evidence that we had for the recommendations that we're making. And luckily for us, as part of this Delaware River Watershed Initiative, we have these great partnerships. And so we were able to partner with Stroud, which again gives ordinary people like me the opportunity to work with real scientists and conduct real scientific studies. So I know Erin's going to talk a little bit later about the types of resources that might be available for your group. But I do encourage you to check it out because we do accomplish a lot. So what I'll run through is a little bit about our program, the sensor and monitoring stations that we have installed and the ways that we use them. And then I'll talk a little bit about what we really hope to accomplish through all this. So we started a citizen science program. I don't know how well you can see this on your screen, but this was just a giant poster that we put out, letting regular people know that if they were interested in contributing to the greater good, that even without any scientific background, that they could be taught to do everything that is needed to play a vital role in real scientific study. And so we know that we got a lot of people who were quite interested. So we were super excited about that, and we got moving on it right away. So these are the folks at Stroud. This is the day that we installed our monitoring station. These are actually considered do-it-yourself monitoring stations, so you can find instructions on how to create these type of stations online. You can work with Stroud, or there's other organizations that provide the same type of support to groups like ours. So I want you to take a couple of notes here when looking at these photos. First, I want you to notice the level of the stream. Very low. Those are base conditions. It hasn't rained. It hasn't been too dry. It's just a regular standard day on the Lopat at the sensor station. So the level of the stream you see there is standard flow. I also want you to take note of the photo on the left where you see Dave Bresler from Stroud. He is right there mapping out our cross section. And I just want you to keep that term mapping out the cross section in mind because we're going to talk about that again later. So needless to say, once we got this awesome sensor station set up, it's filled with all sorts of widgets and doohickeys and scientific things that create magical scientific numbers. And there I am posing with it. But on the right, you see, I'm working with some volunteers to train them on how to work to maintain it. And this is where, again, I want to highlight that concept that you can work with people who have a great background in science. And if you've got somebody in your community who does have some great analytic background or some scientific degree and they want to help you, invite them in. But the point is that you don't have to be that. Something as simple as cleaning the sensor station may seem like a nominal task, but if you're willing to put in the time to do that, again, you're contributing to us getting the clear data we need to tell the story we need to make the recommendations that we're making convincing. So it's a great program to start, and people are really receptive to putting a little bit of time in to help out their community. So the sensors that we put in are measuring these 4 data points. It's recording them online and on a hard copy every 5 minutes, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're monitoring there based on temperature, which is a deep concern for our trout population. We know that areas of Lopatcong Creek have become extremely warm, which is dangerous for the future of our trout population in the stream. The depth of the stream, conductivity, which is often associated with sodium chloride or road salt, and the turbidity, which is just kind of the muckiness of the stream, how dirty it is as the water's passing by. And what you see, if you can see this graph somewhat well, this is a little bit about what it looks like when it reports online, looking only at the depth. So what you're seeing there is that a rainstorm passed by. So this shows up on the screen every time I go over it, but this is showing you from August 4th to August 5th, there was a bit of a rainstorm, and once the rain passed, the water levels came back down, and you can see they remained a little bit higher for quite a while than they were before the storm. So just to get a sense of what it looks like when your sensor stations are reporting online and you're able to track this stuff in real time all the time. Now, these photos are a little blurry, but I wanted to showcase them because I think that they help to illustrate a little bit about what we see with the sensor station. So the top portion of this here is showing you another storm passing by. What you see here is the blue line with the depth going up, lots more water in the stream. But simultaneously, the red line is your conductivity. Again, that could be caused by road salt. So with the depth going up, maybe the road salt is diluted quite a bit, and then that simultaneously goes down. And you can look once again at the bottom of the chart. In the same exact storm, you see that the turbidity has also gone up along the same path and come back down. Interestingly enough, this little spike right here is probably just a fish swimming by the camera, or a twig floating by, and we would pull that right out of the data before we fully analyzed it. So the sensor is reporting some pretty comprehensive information, and that's super exciting. But we can really take that a couple of steps further. So I had told you in the beginning to take note of the notion of a cross section. So you have to sort of channel your inner Moses and imagine that you can slice the stream in half. The water stands still. You can look at it dead on and get a sense of what the shape of the stream bed is like, just like you see in this image here. And there's a lot that can be done with that. Now that we know the scientists at Stroud have our cross section fully matched, we can go back in, put up that tagline you see behind my head here, which is just, with the measuring tape, and we go from bank to bank, and we use our flow meter, which I'm holding there, that measures the speed or the velocity of the water. So going from bank to bank every few inches or every few feet, depending on the conditions, and recording the depth and the velocity of the water allows you to determine the total discharge. That's just how much water is in the stream. Now, if you live in New Jersey, you may have noticed that a lot of our streams have been turned into like glorified stormwater channels every time it rains. So it really can be important to get a sense of the patterns in the discharge of your stream overall in itself. So I know that that's a lot, but I think that it should make pretty good sense. If you know exactly what the shape of the water is, what the channel is, you know how deep the water is and how fast it's going, you know how much water there is. And what you really want to do is you want to get all of those type of discharge measurements in a series of different conditions. So you go out on a base flow like we did in the beginning. You go out when there's been a small rainstorm. You go out after there's been a big rainstorm. You go out after there's been several days of rainstorms. And you just try to find a multitude of different conditions wherein you can get in the stream and measure that discharge. And so, as you can see, I took that very seriously. I'm super, super dedicated to the process, but I do not suggest that you do this, because the second I got in the stream at that moment, I knew I had to get back out. I just had to hand my volunteer a camera to take a picture first. But so again, the stream has a lot of variables, and if you can get a real solid understanding of them, you can then take things to that next level of making scientific assumptions. So something called the discharge rating curve. If you go in and you get a sense how much total volume, how much discharge what is in the stream in all of these different conditions, and you plot them on a graph like we did here, and you see a nice linear equation reveal itself, well, the scientists go abracadabra, they make a mathematical equation, and you now have a discharge rating curve. And that allows you to look only at one data point, which is already reporting on your sensor station, which is the depth, in order to determine the discharge. I go, all right, well, we know based on our equation that we have that if the stream is at this depth, it's probably got about this much water in it. So again, it provides you the opportunity to create an equation that allows you to make scientific assumptions without going back in to continuously do that discharge measuring. So it's pretty exciting. And then we can really take things up a level even further. So if you go into your stream, you take your discharge measurement, you use your flow meter, it's lots of fun, actually, especially if the water is actually moving. But at the same time, you also take a water sample. we send these additional supplemental samples out to the scientists at Stroud, and then they analyze those samples. And they're looking for the exact amounts of the different contaminants that are of concern to us in Lopatcong Creek. Like the nitrogen and the phosphorus that comes off the lawns and the farms, the sodium chloride, once again, from the road salt, the total suspended solid, just the dirt and the muck that gets in the stream. And if we recreate the same pattern that I just discussed, wherein we get a sense of how much nitrogen is in the stream in a variety of different conditions, and then we again plot them on a graph, get a nice linear line, we have an equation that allows us later to look back at the sensor station and determine what the likely nitrogen levels are based on the depth alone. So the idea that you take this station that's reporting this information and you just are able to expand upon that just by generating a few mathematical equations with the help of some scientific friends, I'm sure you can see that it really tells a compelling story about what's going on in your stream, and it allows you to collect that empirical evidence that you need to tell the story that you're telling. So that was the sensor station stuff. I know it was a lot. I didn't want to take too much time getting into it. But as far as I'm concerned, it's some of the coolest stuff that we do. And we really appreciate the scientists at Stroud for supporting us through that process, because they have really allowed us to learn a lot. And we're very sure that that's going to create some excellent outcomes in the near future. So I moved on to the slide about E. coli bacteria, because of course, once we had a citizen science program going, we wanted to know what else we could do with it. And one of our big issues in the Lopatcong Creek happens to be E. coli bacteria. And we would love to do microbial source tracking, which if you're familiar with Nancy Lawler, she calls it, whose poop is it? Sort of the scientific assessment of whose poop is it? Because E. coli bacteria obviously comes from poop. But so we don't have the funds to do that really costly microbial source tracking analysis. But what we do have are the funds to apply citizen science to the process so that we can take samples, incubate them overnight, get a sense of where the E. coli levels are a genuine problem, and then prioritize the areas where we might want to take that a step further and do the microbial source tracking. So all we do, you take the sample, you incubate it overnight, boom, you have the results of your E. coli. And sometimes it is quite alarming, I'll be honest. Now, this is something I'm very excited to talk about. This was brought to us by our friend and colleague, Keith Frishy at Trout Unlimited. And I know that they talked about it in the previous session with Nancy Lawler on MWA also. But Keith suggested to us that it would be helpful to do a coordinated temperature check. So we know that the sensor station is reporting the temperature all the time. We know 24 hours a day what the temperature is in the stream, but just in that spot. And he thought there was real value in getting a sense of the variables across the length of the stream as it is. So this was fun. It was easy. And we learned an incredible amount of information from it. So you can see what we did is we just stationed one volunteer at each one of these plot points here. There was one person at each one of these places. Some people had 2 spots, and all they had was a thermometer. And we all went out to the stream in our chosen location, and all we did was take the temperature of the stream at the exact same time. So we were able to see what those variables are in real time. And you can see that just based on the blue dots at the top, the red dots in the middle, and the blue dots at the bottom, that there was some pretty compelling and new information coming out of this. We can see that the temperatures are nice and cold up here. No wonder why our wild trout love the top of the stream so much. We can see that the water temperatures slowly degrade a bit. You come down through the suburbs, and it just, the temperatures become really, really, really dangerous for them. But we also noticed that there was a log jam in that area. And then below that, we noticed that there was a big input of groundwater, which was making the water super cold and super awesome for trout again. So that tells us that if we were able to remove that log barrier that we identified, and we might be able to make it possible for the fish to move out of the areas where the conditions aren't good and into the areas where the conditions are better, and have a freer movement back and forth, so they don't get stuck in the center of the watershed when conditions are too warm for them to survive or breed. So that was a really cool thing. I thank Keith for bringing that to us. We intend to continue to do that, a series more times and in different conditions again, to see if we can tell an even more compelling story about what's going on with the temperatures along the Lopatcong Creek. The idea in the grand scheme of things here is to communicate what's going on in a comprehensive and clear way that makes sense to ordinary people. One of the best things about not being a scientist and working on science is that if it doesn't make sense to me, it's not going to make sense to the people I'm trying to communicate with. So I work very hard on helping my colleagues understand the types of things we're trying to showcase. And I haven't created either of these charts, but they have. And you can see this top one here. This is a really compelling story. This is about the sodium chloride. So these are the salt levels in the stream. And what's running across it here, this red line, is the limit for healthy drinking water. So you can clearly see how frequently the Lopatcong Creek is measuring above those healthy limits. This graph at the bottom is also very interesting because it goes from 62 degrees, which is great for trout, to 74 degrees, which is really dangerous for trout. And you can see the red line that runs up and down right here is the Lopatcong Creek sitting at 73.8 degrees, right on the line. And this is the kind of thing that gets the attention of the people who love our trout stream. I'm not in an area where the idea of being green is motivating, but the idea of being able to take your kids fishing in your community is something that people are open to listening to. And when you can showcase the problem and how on the edge you are, you can really make a difference. So this is all about telling the story. Christine Rogers, who is our moderator today, she's actually also has a Stroud sensor station up in the pollen scale. And what you're seeing in front of you here, this Lopatcong Creek water quality report, is imaginary at this point. But we're currently working with Stroud to turn all of the long-term data that exists for the pollen scale into a clear report from that sensor station that provides a really comprehensive analysis, a clear assessment of what's going on in the water, summarizes the concerns, and makes clear recommendations so that we have the leverage of the Stroud Water Research Center behind us when we bring this report to the powers that be and help to convince them to make the changes that we're recommending. And of course, when you create a report like this, it's filled with data and methodology and all of the things that help to legitimize the information that you're sharing. So this is our vision for the future. Christine and I are hard at work getting started on that. It's a big job, but we know that once we're able to turn all of this long-term data and trending that we have on these streams into a comprehensive report, that we'll be able to put those reports into the hands of the right people and hopefully motivate the changes that we need in our community. So with that said, if this presentation really got you going, you can join me tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. in Phillipsburg for our 7th annual Lopatcong Creek cleanup. We work with the Trout Unlimited Ridge and Valley chapter for those events, and they're super fun. And I hope you guys have understood some of the stuff I've thrown at you today. It's been certainly exciting to share it with you. If I can do it, anybody can do it. That's probably pretty clear by now. If you have technical questions, you'll have to ask Erin, but I'll be here at the end. So thank you very much. I will, I guess, toss it off directly to Erin.
Okay, great. Thank you, Juniper. I'm going to share my screen. Now, can you see my screen now? It was blacked out for a bit.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And I think for those of you who are need to make it bigger, if you just double click on this, it'll be the main part of the screen. But anyway, hi, good morning. I'm Erin Stretz. I am from the Watershed Institute, which is an organization protecting clean water and healthy habitats in central New Jersey. And today I am here to talk about you starting your own monitoring program. So Juniper gave a really great explanation into
how someone, as she said, who's not perhaps like inclined towards science, can start a scientific monitoring program. I'm trying to make it real easy for all of you to do the same thing. But first, before you begin monitoring, you really need to establish what your reasons are for beginning a program. Typically that begins at the most basic level with environmental education, getting people out into the stream, citizen engagement, making them comfortable and get to know their sense of place, get to know their local waterways. Then that can move up into report cards. So Juniper was just talking about the report that they're intending to put together kind of on baseline conditions in Lopatcong Creek. What's going on? How can we share this with the public? The step up from that would be local municipal advocacy. So if you are seeing a situation like there's a problem with road salt in your stream, and you are noticing that the road salt trucks are pulling up next to a stream or at a red light, and they don't turn off their salting mechanism and it just kind of like dumps it out at a red light and then they keep going, that salt has to go somewhere. It's going to wash off into a stream. And if you collect road salt data or conductivity, then you can advocate to your local municipality that they need to do something about that. Up from that, you can measure the effectiveness of project installation. So things like green infrastructure or dam removals. These are really popular projects nowadays, and it makes these projects even more valuable when we're able to measure their actual impact to water quality. So you can do pre-project assessments and post-project assessments, compare that and really get a sense of how effective you're being with your projects. You can also target advanced monitoring activities. So if you are from an organization and you really don't have the resources to invest in really serious monitoring equipment and you just get test strips or something like that, or if you do habitat assessment, which is basically free, you can go out, you can identify problems, and then go to groups or to an agency that has the capacity to do more rigorous monitoring there, to do that monitoring based on the kind of preliminary data that your group provides. And kind of like the pinnacle, I guess, of things to do with your data would be the integrated report. So the Clean Water Act requires that all 50 states must produce a comprehensive review of water quality in their state every 2 years. And so depending on the size of the state, clearly there's going to be different burdens for the staff, the agency staff, to go out and monitor. And community monitoring data can really help to fill in some of those gaps to make the integrated report truly comprehensive. And it's from this then that you would develop new Category 1 protections for really high quality streams. Or you can establish total maximum daily loads, or TMDLs, for streams where you're really seeing a lot of impairments. So who actually uses this data? We have students and teachers, the general public, municipal officials, NGOs, academia, and agencies. And so you can kind of see that the quality of data that you're providing to a kid who's splashing around in the stream, who you just want to get comfortable in the water, does not have to be as stringent as the kind of data that you're providing to someone like New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. For them to be able to use that data in the integrated report, it needs to be defensible. They need to be able to really show that that data is accurate and precise, so that they can rely on it, just in case anyone comes back and says, I don't want those Category 1 protections here. I want to, build up right next to the stream. Then that data needs to be really high quality to be able to throw back and say, nope, here's the data, it's a great stream, we're going to protect it. So in New Jersey, we have established a 3-tiered system for defining the data quality for community monitoring groups. Tier 1, 2, 3. Tier 1 is educational. Tier 2 is targeting. And Tier 3 would be regulatory data for a state agency. So there are different requirements for your project, for your study design, for each of these 3 tiers. At Tier 1, really this would be, so if you're using your data to go to your local municipality to prove that a construction project has gone wrong, or to advocate for just stronger environmental regulations in general, it's a good idea to have a basic study design. So that's just really a way of you developing a structure for your monitoring program, defining how you're going to collect your data in the methods, where you're going to collect your data in the locations, and when you're going to collect your data in the time frame. And when you develop this, it really helps you and your volunteers who are out there on the ground to know what they should be doing and when. So at the Tier 2 level, this is for data at the targeting kind of purpose. If you are measuring effectiveness of a project, or if you are interested in collecting preliminary data for other groups to then build off of, this would be kind of at that Tier 2 level. For this, the requirement is that you develop a quality assurance project plan. So if you're unfamiliar, sometimes it's called a QAP. This is a study design that's kind of taken to the next level. So not only are you documenting how you're collecting the data and where and with who, you're also documenting how you're going to prove to people using your data that that data is accurate. So we'll go over some specific kind of QA measures shortly. For the Tier 3 level, which is regulatory data use, you definitely need a quality assurance project plan, and it would need to be approved by the agency using your data. So typically for the integrated report, that would be for DEP to approve. And then there are additional requirements from there. So not only do you have to develop a QAP, but it has to have kind of standard things in it. So if you're doing chemical monitoring, or if you're doing bacteria analyses, you have to be a certified lab or use a certified lab for that data to be considered at the Tier 3 level. Now, it's totally possible for community monitoring groups to become a certified lab. And this would apply even for handheld meters or continuous monitoring devices that Juniper went over. You would need to go through the process with DEP, Office of Quality Assurance, to become certified. There are some barriers, I think, to that. Currently, I believe it's around $1,200 to start your first year, and then $800 or $900 every year thereafter. So it's an expensive process for sure. Or if you're doing macroinvertebrate or habitat assessments, you have to use a defined method that has been documented by the Watershed Watch Network. And so I'm not going to go into exactly what those methods are here. If you are interested in getting into the weeds, then you can hop on our website at njwatershedwatch.org to see exactly what those methods are. But I did want to go over the fact that there are different levels of commitment for each of these different tiers. So within that Tier 3 regulatory level macroinvertebrate monitoring, we also have defined 3 different ways that you can collect macroinvertebrates at Tier 3. So this is kind of a good, better, best model. The good model is, if you're familiar with it, it's like the AmeriCorps sampling method. You're going out in the field, you're identifying bugs stream side and then returning the bugs back to the stream. This usually takes about 2 to 4 hours when you're starting out per sample. And all you really need are the sampling supplies themselves. Now, if you're looking at the best type of macroinvertebrate monitoring that would get you the most accurate, the most precise data, then the level of volunteer training really goes down, because all your volunteers are doing is going out and collecting a sample and preserving it. So you have to get ethanol, you put all of your stuff into a jar, preserve it with ethanol, and then you send it out to a lab to do the identification to genus or species. So at that best level, you would need to also contribute $150 to $250 per sample for that sample to be analyzed by a lab. So there are varying methods that you can use under Tier 3, and these methods also have varying levels of data quality requirements. And I wanted to really emphasize that for this type of monitoring, or macroinvertebrate monitoring at Tier 3, this is only if you want your data to be used by the DEP for the integrated report, for Category 1 protections, for TMDLs. These are the kind of hoops that you have to jump through to prove that your data is correct. So one question we want to ask is, how do we know the volunteers know what they're doing out in the field? So something that we are instituting starting in the beginning of 2021, and this goes for existing monitoring programs as well, not just those starting out, is we're requiring all volunteers to receive field audits every 3 years. So this would be me or you as the program coordinator going out in the field, watching the volunteers, making sure they are using the appropriate methods. You can kind of check it off on your checklist and say, great, they know what they're doing, excellent. But if your volunteers are also identifying macroinvertebrates, we need to prove that they know what they're doing, that they know how to identify those macroinvertebrates. So we're also instituting identification proficiency testing for the level to which your volunteers are identifying macroinvertebrates. That could be to the order and family level for Tier 3.1, to the all family level for Tier 3.2. And we're requiring all volunteers to pass this test with 90%. Now that seems like a really high requirement, right? But a lot of people that have gone through it already pass, and they do well. So I feel like it seems intimidating at first, but it's not too tough once you get down into it. So I would like to make the case that if you are interested in beginning a monitoring program, that you start with macroinvertebrate and habitat assessments. This is perhaps the least expensive entrance point into monitoring, and it's the one for which we have the most documentation for. So as I showed, we have those methods explicitly outlined. We have standardized quality assurance project plans that I can give out to you to use to kind of develop your own study design for your own project. And biological assessments are also good because they kind of bring all of this data together. You can go out to a stream, take a look at it, do a visual assessment of the habitat to say, does our aquatic life thriving here? On the other end of the spectrum, you can stick a meter in the water and measure conductivity or dissolved oxygen. And you can kind of try to answer the question, is this a healthy stream? But, you know, as in the case that Juniper showed, if you aren't out in the stream during a storm event, when conductivity shoots through the roof, when dissolved oxygen drops below the water quality standard, if you're not out there right at that point, you're going to miss it. So biological monitoring is kind of this overall type of monitoring, looking at the stream health holistically. These bugs live in the stream. If there was a huge influx of pollutants, they would die off. And you would see that measured in your macroinvertebrate communities a year, 2 years later, even. So if you're wondering, you know, if you want to start a program and you're like, should I do Tier 2, Tier 3? This is just a review of kind of what that data could be used for. And quality assurance project plans are required for both of these tiers. So I figure, why not take the jump and go to Tier 3 and have your data used for, you know, the most purposes that it can be used for. Now, the New Jersey Watershed Watch Network can help groups get started with these programs. The Watershed Watch Network is a program that is funded by the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, and it's administered by the Watershed Institute. But But ultimately, I'm the coordinator of that program, and I work with a team, a committee from DEP. We get together quarterly. There's representatives from freshwater and biological monitoring, from the Office of Quality Assurance, from the Bureau of Environmental Assessment, Restoration, and Standards, et cetera, et cetera. And so we get together and we talk about issues that are impacting the volunteer monitoring community. And in that way, the network can kind of serve as a liaison between DEP or agency staff and community monitoring groups, where that was kind of a vacant position in the past, where groups were feeling a little bit left out in the cold. Hopefully now we can provide that information to groups to really build them up and to build capacity for volunteer monitoring in the state. So more specifically, the network can provide staff and volunteer training. So if you as organizational staff need training before you can then put your program together, we can certainly put that together either one-on-one or as part of a stream school. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Or we can train your volunteers directly to get them ready to go, to get them tested and up to speed so that they can get out and start collecting data. As I mentioned, we can also provide assistance with developing your study designs or quality assurance project plans. The network also offers equipment loans. So for example, we're doing a road salt study this winter. And so we'll be loaning out equipment to different groups who want to contribute data to this study to head out, take a conductivity and chloride measurement during or right after a heavy snow melt or rainfall to see what the impact of road salt is on the stream. And something that we're getting into is we're purchasing biological monitoring equipment so that we can also loan that out to groups as well. And then the Watershed Institute also provides a small grants program to organizations throughout the state. If you are looking to start a new monitoring program, I would say that's a good place to go to kind of get some startup funds. I think the grants go up to $10,000, and the next cycle will begin in July or August. So we're just kind of starting this year, but if you are interested, you can keep your eye out for our next year RFP. So currently in New Jersey, we have about 49 organizations that are part of this monitoring network. And that includes nonprofit organizations who are actively monitoring or who are being kind of trained up so that they can start their monitoring program. And that also includes service providers. So in the map on the right-hand side, your active monitors are those red dots, those organizations that are doing just educational monitoring. They're not interested in using their data beyond just environmental education. These are the orange dots. And then the blue dots are the service providers. So these are organizations that are there to help you as a community monitoring group. So for example, you can see just west of Philadelphia, that blue dot, that would be Stroud Water Research Center. That's an organization that is providing those DIY continuous monitoring units to pop in your stream and basically stream that data over the internet straight to you. It's a really great resource. Another really great service provider would be the Interstate Environmental Commission over here on Long Island. They do free bacteria testing for anyone who is willing to drive to Long Island. But there's a lot of really great resources out there. And if you would like to add yourself to the map, there are just a few things that you would need to get going. One, I would say that you need one person at your organization who's willing to take on this project, who really can get it going and keep it going. So while I can help you, or the network can help you get started, you guys need to run this program. You also need clearly volunteers and a way to train those volunteers. So if you have a bunch of people who really are loyal to your organization, I'm sure they'd be more than happy to get out and actually get their feet wet and contribute to the cause. You would also need to establish a list of monitoring sites. And usually the way that we do this is we look at a map, we pinpoint where the site should be on an aerial map, and then we go out in the field and we recon them. So we say, can we actually get into the stream at this point? Is it like a huge mountain and volunteers can't climb down into it? Is the stream way too deep and we can't access the habitat to do macroinvertebrate monitoring? And I think someone asked a question earlier about access to private property. I will say that I have trespassed more times than I care to admit, but really the best practice that you should be doing is if you are going on anyone's private property, you should just ask permission. Typically, if you knock on someone's door and it's just a residence and you say, hey, I want to monitor your water quality, and you know, you can share that data right back with them. They're like, yeah, come on, park in my driveway, come have a cup of coffee when you're done, you know. Other times they are less less forthcoming, I think, with access. But the only way to know is to ask, request permission. And then you need monitoring equipment. So you need your nets, you need your buckets, you need your sieves, things like that. And if you're wondering what you need, I have a list of supplies that you would need to get started for macroinvertebrate monitoring. And then, of course, your study design. Again, that's something that I can help walk you through. So the next opportunity for training for either staff or for your volunteers would be Stream School. And I am holding that next in the spring, a weekend in April or early May. And I am on the hunt for an organization who is willing to partner with me for the spring. So if you think that you're interested in learning more, we can definitely make that happen. Let me know and we can put something on the calendar. Basically what Stream School is in the COVID era is 3 webinars during the week that go over habitat assessments, macroinvertebrate collections, and macroinvertebrate identifications, and then 1 socially distanced in-field, in-person field day, field training in the stream. So we did this successfully in the fall, and I think that we can replicate that again in the spring. So again, if you're interested, please reach out. So what are you waiting for, folks? Let's start monitoring. Here's my contact information. If you have any questions after the fact, please shoot me an email, or you can check out more information on our website at njwatershedwatch.org. Thank you. I'm gonna stop sharing.
Okay, so we have some questions in the chat, so we'll go through those first. So there was some discussion about the tiered aspect of your presentation, Erin. So
Okay.
what organization has established these tiers for data quality? And then are you able to share a link or a document that more fully outlines the different criteria?
So the first part of your question is who created the tiers? Is that the question?
Yes.
So that is DEP. DEP has put these together with me as the Watershed Watch Network. So I'm just kind of the person sharing the information, but it is a DEP kind of sponsored system. There definitely is documentation of the tiered system on njwatershedwatch.org. And you know how it goes at DEP, it takes a while for things to work their way up the chain to be approved. So very soon, I think that we'll have a more fleshed out, more finalized version of your document on the website as well. And when that is totally final, I will email it out to the people on the Watershed Watch Network email list.
Perfect. Nancy was asking about if there's any recommendations for monitoring during COVID.
Great question. Yeah. So the way that we're doing it is there's kind of 3 different things that we would do. One, you have to drive separately to the site where usually we would carpool, put a bunch of people in a truck with your gear and get going. everyone should drive separately to the site. Second, you really should keep your distance, obviously, like the same kind of protocols, wear a mask, stay 6 feet apart when you're out in the field. But third is you want to try to minimize the exchange of equipment. So if you have a handheld meter and a net or something like that, you want one person to be able to, who's like going to keep their hands on the meter all day, one person who's on net duty all day, so that you're not just interchanging equipment.
Okay. And then there was a question about beet juice, and if you have any knowledge about that. Krista started answering the question and said that it had its own issues, but do either of you have anything to add to that?
Well, I had just answered that, it's been something I've heard about. Just like Krista, there's always a critic and there's always multiple sides of the story. It was interesting to me, and I've asked a lot about it. But, I'm just not really in an area where you can say something like that and be taken seriously, as legitimate as it might be. So we're kind of working on baby steps. Our issues with the salt are making sure it's stored properly. A lot of times if there's a pile of road salt and it's not covered and it rains, well, all the road salt's going to end up in the stream. And then also, I think our first step where it comes to road salt is to help to convince the powers that be that it is an issue, and therefore they should be trying to minimize the use, not only for reasons of water quality, but also for cost. So sometimes you got to get them by the wallet. But the truth is, we do a lot of pre-salting just in case, and we really need to get out of that habit.
And Mitchell, I would just add that I know Dr. Matt Schuler from Montclair State University is doing this research right now, and actually just gave a presentation at Montclair about last week or so on this topic. So I bet you can find it on their website or contact him directly. Another question that came up was from Larry. It was about the private land, but I think that's been pretty much addressed. So if we're going to have any monitoring that needs to take place on private land, contacting the landowner, and then Nancy mentioned about written permission to share the data. Okay, so then let's see, we got a couple more that just came in. Okay, so is this data quality monitoring program available to urban park lakes?
Absolutely, yeah. So this applies really, so first let me just say, we're using the term community monitoring as a way to kind of combine all of the different terms that are used for this type of work. So it's been called volunteer monitoring in the past. It's been called citizen science. Really, it's just any non-agency, non-academic people out there in the world collecting data. So even if, and this was something that I had to kind of overcome when I got into the field, even if you have a scientific background, just because you don't work for an agency, that makes you a volunteer. That makes you a community monitor. So it's not just your program's volunteers, it's you as well who's part of this community monitoring world. So these data quality tiers apply to anyone who wants to submit their data for use by academia, by agencies, by municipalities. This is just a way for us to kind of organize how we're collecting that data so that it's just better structured, so we can all understand it. And so it's comparable, I think, between organizations as well. So yes, short answer, yes.
And then Donna asked, what will the Watershed Institute do with the monitoring results on road salt?
Yeah, great question. So we actually tried this road salt monitoring project last year, and it was a bust because you can't really monitor road salt when it doesn't really snow. So, but we're trying again this year. And what we're planning to do is we have a contact at DEP who is basically putting together a study on road salt in New Jersey. We're looking into the actual data itself, which is how we can contribute to this project. And they're looking into the other questions that were posed here. What are the best methods? Kind of compiling a list of which municipalities use what, so that we can just you kind of have to know what's going on to then act on that. So this is kind of the information gathering phase for road salt. And I think at the conclusion of this, DEP will provide a document to municipalities making suggestions for what they need to be doing going forward.
Okay, and then Krista just asked, did this year's road salt study show a spike? Hold on, my thing moved. Did this year's road salt study show a spike because of the lack of snow?
No, we, and I think that also, so our study design for this project was that groups should go out and collect 6 samples throughout the winter, 3 that were kind of during baseline conditions when no salt had been applied, when there's no runoff, and then 3 that are following a salting event and a runoff event. So we're actually seeing the salt getting into the stream. So no, we did not see any spikes because all we had were those baseline measurements this time around. And by the time we got started in early January, we really didn't have a lot of road salting at that point from then on. So this time we're starting in November.
Okay, so if anyone else has questions for the chat, we have a couple minutes left. I have a question for both of you. What would you say, Juniper, is the biggest difficulty in getting a volunteer monitoring program started?
Well, actually, I kind of think that that's what you and I are addressing right now in trying to produce those reports, because, we had gotten the program going. We were going into the stream, getting all of those different measurements, collecting all of this data, but it really wasn't landing anywhere. So I just felt that our volunteers weren't being, shown what the outcomes were, what they were accomplishing by taking the time out of their lives to do this. And so now that we are working to take all of this brilliant academic data that's been taken over such a long term that it shows clear patterns and evidence, and turning it into a comprehensive report that people on my level can understand, I think that our volunteers are starting to see that they're a part of something that's meant to generate action. I mean, that's why they want to be a volunteer in water quality. And if they're just cleaning a sensor, it's not particularly motivating if you don't see an outcome. So we're moving toward that by generating these reports from the data that these folks are helping to collect. And I think that goes a long way to keeping people engaged.
I think
okay, and then Krista, I think this is just
want to know that they're being effective. Yeah.
Connected to a bigger picture, right? Yeah. Okay, so I think this is just a more general question for everyone. Is anyone here using a water reporter to show community science data? So that was just Krista's question she just posted, and I think that's
You'll
for the
have to
entire
give me
group.
a private tutorial on that one, Krista, like you constantly have to on everything else. You're used to it.
I'm not.
Well, this is really great. Well,
I don't know of any groups who are. Literati for trash. Yes.
The only thing that I would maybe ask everyone to do before you leave the session, maybe send Erin a private message and put in a good word for the Lopatcong Creek Initiative for one of those Watershed Institute grants, because we've been trying to get one of those for a long time. So.
Oh man, I am not on the grant review committee.
You could still put in a good word.
I should say, yeah, that's fine.
I was only kidding, but thank you. Couldn't resist.
Well, thank you both. We're out of time. It's 11:20, so I just want to thank you both for your great presentations.